Welcome to Yates's Espresso Bar.
Hello there, and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast, and it's another visit to Yates's Espresso Bar. We're recording on the 3rd of March, just after Forest had a defeat away at Brighton, and today we're joined by a voice from the past for regular listeners. Adam, it's nice to speak to you once again. How are things for you?
Yeah, it's lovely to be back. Quite a lot's changed in my world since we last recorded, but it's been a bit of a roller coaster couple of months, same as it is for Forest, I suppose, really. But now, look, I'm happy to be back. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you today. And so in today's podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about managerial stuff, obviously. We'll talk a bit about the players as well, and a little bit of the fallout from the Fenerbahce fans. Let's start off with that one then, Adam. So obviously a really, really good away victory, and then a week later, the match was understandably a little bit more flat. The Fenerbahce fans lit up their pyros in the second minute of the game and caused a delay. And then afterwards, we saw all the damage to the away end. And then we've heard, and I believe it's still kind of rumour rather than being confirmed, but Forest are liable to get a fine along with the Turkish team, presumably for not really searching the fans enough or not having enough security in terms of how the away end was managed. How does that feel to you?
Um, Look, if we want to play like a very slight devil's advocate, I don't think there's a lot really I can say in that sense. But if we're going to play it a little bit, you shouldn't be allowed to get flares into the ground. I know from personal experience sitting in Trent End, I don't think I've ever been searched going into the ground. So
Mm.
I know that it's something that they could actively do a lot more, is searching fans as they go in the ground. You can't really blame the stewards. I mean, look,
Mm.
because I know that that's also part of the fines thing is about controlling fans within the ground from your stewarding team and anything that you put in place with the police and all that sort of stuff. So it's not just the aspect of, oh well, they made the damage, so it's their fault. They were put in a position to be able to make the damage, so we take part of the blame. Is how it works. But the big caveat to the but, even though the flares got in the ground and that was an issue, one of the larger issues was that they damaged the property inside the ground. There is no one that could have been. You can't have stewards stood in between fans. There is no one that could have been there to have prevented that element of happening. So when it comes to the criminal damage in the ground, because that's what I view it as for sure, that's not okay from any respect. And Fenerbahce should be sent the bill for however much it costs to get those seats repaired, which will need to be repaired for the Fulham game.
Yeah, and from what I've read, and again, it's unconfirmed, it does sound as though Forest will have the right to be able to send the invoice Fenerbahce for that. Certainly, it's historically clubs have had to kind of carry the can for the behaviour of their fans, and certainly, I would also say that yeah, Europa League matches, you're more likely to get searched. I would have thought that the reputation of the Fenerbahce fans perhaps could have preceded the match in terms of the searching and the levels of security. I mean, we were joking before the match that maybe it would have been better to kind of kettle them in kind of the Grantham marketplace and then bus them in from there to match the experience of the Reds fans out in Istanbul.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that was crazy, really, wasn't it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've only been to one away European game. I've been to all the home games. I've only been to one away one, which was Utrecht, and that was obviously the experience of being in the city centre, getting the bus to the ground, and that. And I did think to myself, do you know what? Actually, from a safety perspective, that's not a bad thing, right? It wasn't that long before kickoff for the Utrecht game either, so it's not as if you had to be like shackled and whatever. But for the Reds fans that went to Fenerbahce, I'm definitely feel for you because it's a long time before kickoff, 2 hours after kickoff, and then for us to sort of give the Fenerbahce fans, a bit of the free reign and stuff of being able to go into the ground, and I know they got held after, but I sure don't believe they got held for 2 hours after. So it look, maybe it's something that we should needs to be looked at, but with all due respect in the world to Forest current predicament, I don't think we're going to have to worry about European games at the City Ground next season. So it's how we deal with it this season may not have been the best, but then at the same time, it's kind of like, well, it might not be a problem going forward.
Well, yeah, and also you live and you learn as you go along. I mean, the reason for the security and fan management in Istanbul is because obviously they've had several teams playing in several international competitions for years and years on end. So maybe it's just what they've learned to do. Um, let's move back to things on the pitch. Now, obviously, it's been a while since we've heard from you on this podcast, Adam. So without going too much into stuff that we've already discussed, when it came to the sacking of Sean Dyche, first of all, in a word or in a sentence, did you agree with that decision?
Tough. Partially yes, is what I would say. I think it's points per game was fine. I do think that we would have dragged out some horrific results and won games. Vitor Pereira is going to have us play better football. I don't know at this part of the season. Maybe you don't need to play good football. You just need to win games. But I,
Yeah.
I would say I'm more on the side of yes. I think it was the right decision.
Yeah, I go back to a couple of weeks ago, we had Raymundo Football on this show, and he was saying that he put forward kind of a really interesting view, which is a guy, sometimes you don't, he's going, I'm not worried about tactics, I'm more worried about kind of atmosphere. And certainly the atmosphere in that Wolves game was toxic, wasn't it? And you add in kind of the fans being unhappy and then the players apparently not being happy, and you can see why Marinakis felt he needed to make a change, can't you?
Yeah, I think you brought in your firefighting manager too early. I
Yeah.
don't think that in October you should have been reaching for Sean Dyche's number in your phone. I think you could have brought in a more progressive manager that could have tried to still get some good football and some good performances out of the players. It's not to say that we didn't have any good performances under Sean Dyche either. You know, Liverpool away, for example, Tottenham at home. So we had good performances under him. It's just more of a case of if it almost felt like Marinakis seemed to not understand the football that would be played under Sean Dyche. And I know that Sean Dyche showed the dream to all the fans. I've never been given a squad this good. I've never been able to play expansive football. I've never been able to take the shackles off to go right into putting the shackles back on this Forest squad, right? So
Mm.
I think that we can probably agree that Sean Dyche wasn't the right manager to be brought in October. I think Marinakis panicked after Ange went so poorly, and Ange also wasn't the right manager to be brought in, which he also recently on the overlap said he should not have taken that job. It was too soon. So it's more of a catalogue of errors since Nuno left. More than I'm not sitting here saying Sean Dyche is a horrific manager or anything or even Ange is a bad manager. I'm just sat here saying that the fits at the time was probably off. It's the timing that was the issue for me.
Yeah, okay. And I think there's a lot to be said. I think there's a lot of to agree with in what you've said. Hindsight obviously being a wonderful thing. I've put the case before that I think sometimes Marinakis has been a bit too trusting. Whereas for Waz, for example, and if we hark back to those days, he was very, very impulsive. And people argue Marinakis is impulsive, but actually, since had the reins at Forest, on the whole, he's tried to take advice from the right people. And in this instance, the decision to appoint first Postecoglou and then to appoint Deitch at that point in the season, I think that was bad advice. And we saw Nick Randall in the Supporters Trust AGM trying to stand up for Deitch, saying no, he's the right man for the job. From what we understand, it was a Nick Randall and Johnny Owen appointment. And other thing to note, so Johnny Owen has been removed from the board of directors along with Michael Douglas. So whether that's a business decision or there's more to read into that, we don't know. Adam, what's it tell us about Forest players? Because obviously, when you have that number of managers per season, people will ask the question, well, what about the players? So what's it say about the players that when they had that meeting with Marinakis, and they had one after the Leeds match as well, they didn't call out Dyche, but they did say we're not happy with the way things are being done in terms of we feel that are lacking in freedom. We feel that tactics are too rigid. We feel that we're being run into the ground and therefore we don't have enough energy for matches.
I suppose it's modern day football, isn't it? It's player power, isn't it? Like nowadays, players do have a say in who the manager of the football club is, whereas that is a decision that ultimately should be above them. I don't think it's a decision that they should be able to make. However, of course, they will have an opinion on that, and you would understand that. Look, you can't tell me that. It's actually funny because I think Gibbs White played really well under Dyche, but if you're looking at your more expansive players that want to get forward, that want to create goals, that want to score goals, are not going to be happy playing under Sean Dyche, right? The level of football that you're playing under him, you're not going to get that. We all sort of knew that going in, but none of us were under any delusions of grandeur. He's going to come in and he's going to be fantastic, and we're going to shoot up the league and we're going to challenge him for Europe again. That was never, no one ever thought that. I just think it's a weird one because if you had asked the players when you appointed Dyche, is this the style of football you want to play? Is this something that you think would work for this squad? I doubt the players would have signed off on it then. Not that you should do that, by the way. But if you're going to go to them after the Wolves game and say what do you think, or after the Leeds game and say what do you think, then surely you care enough what they think to consider them in that decision. So look, there's a lot of managers out there, and whenever there's the case of, well, if not Dyche, who? There's a lot of available managers, right? I'm not sure who they've approached, but when Nuno left, Ange came in very quickly. When Ange left, Sean Dyche came in very quickly. When Dyche left, Vitor Pereira came in very quickly. I don't know what conversations have gone on behind the scenes. I don't think that any of the appointments were correct, including Vitor Pereira appointment, by the way. So it's just it's just an absolute mess. But I think if you're going to involve the players should be involved at the start and the end, not just the end. But I wouldn't involve the players. I think it's insane. It's just player power of the modern day game.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of equate this to kind of most people in most workplaces. There'll always be managers who are not liked by members of staff and so on, but you still get on and you do the job to the best of your ability. The question being, are you enabled to do the job to the best of your ability? And yeah, we'll come back to managerial stuff a little bit later on in the podcast, but just for the time being, something on the topic of players. Now, Adam, I've waited until you're on the podcast to talk about this because you know more about this than I do. Okay. So, Mrs. Ferraro, when we went to the Liverpool match, she was getting really, really frustrated with the amount of times that Callum Hudson-Odoi would advance on the left. And in the first half, he had Konate and Szoboszlai absolutely on toast. And he'd run forward, and instead of progressing, he would then stop and turn back. Now, she spoke to somebody who said, "Oh, it's an FPL thing." I said, "Well, what's that?" Because, well, apparently some players might do that. They'll turn back and pass to a teammate because it improves their FPL stats because they're not losing the ball as often. You know more about this kind of thing than I do. Do you reckon there's anything in that?
No, no, absolutely not. No,
I'm
I,
also going to
I,
point out as a Derby fan who came up with that theory. So,
no, that's a tactical thing. A lot of managers will have your wingers and have your players try and get to the byline, put the ball in, whip the crossover. Vitor Pereira did this at Wolves as well. It's possession based, right? If Callum looks up and he doesn't think there's a ball on that's going to be successful. It's more about recycling it and getting the ball back into the middle of the field. That's kind of more of a Vitor Pereira style of play than it is anything else. It's probably a little bit the fact that Igor Jesus, whilst he's quite good in the air, is quite small. And against, you know, Van Dijk and Konate, you don't see that getting the ball into Igor Jesus is probably going to be very fruitful. And, unless you go low, whatever. But I think it's probably more of a tactical thing than it is anything else, if I'm being honest with you.
yeah, I mean, certainly it's frustrating when that happens because as a fan, you suddenly see that check back means that there's a line of defenders there that maybe wasn't there before. And I don't know, regular listeners will know, long-term listeners will know that I'm a big fan of the ball into the corridor of uncertainty where without having the height, a player like Gibbs White or Jesus, and certainly Chris Wood was the master of positioning himself to be able to capitalise on those balls. So yeah. Okay, we'll come back to a little bit more about players and about managers in just a sec.
Welcome to Yates's Espresso Bar.
Welcome back to 1865. It's Rich here with Adam as our guest pundit this week. And just a quick one on the Liverpool match, which we were discussing just before the break. Obviously, there's a lot of fallout well, okay, I'll explain how I saw it in terms of my timeline. So when the first decision for McAllister's handball was given, I wasn't expecting it because from where I was, it hit his back. I didn't see it hit his elbow. But the laws are pretty clear on that. You might agree with the law or not agree with the law, but Ashley Barnes of Burnley was a victim of that as well. If it hits your arm and you're the last person before it goes into the goal, then it's got to be a handball. With the second one, I accepted it because, again, it all happened so quickly in the ground. We don't know what's going on. And then when the replays came along and they said, in the screen, it said, no offside against Virgil van Dijk. But Ekitike was in an offside position and he could be deemed to be interfering with play. So was that a clear and obvious error by VAR? Insert debate here. However, when I posted on social media to say it feels harsh because although Murillo's goal at Anfield, Ndoye was in an offside position, it definitely feels worse when it's the 97th minute and you thought you were holding out for a good point.
Yeah. First of all, I hate this. Look, letter of the law, fine. I hate this handball rule. Right? It's just like the Ashley Barnes one was horrific. I'm sorry. It's not for me. Watched that 2 or 3 times on Match of the Day, and it's just I'm not even sure it's hit his arm, or it's very high up to the point where it's like if we're ruling goals out for that, it's frustrating. I personally think the McAllister one was incredibly harsh. Right? I, I, I I probably think the goal should have stood. I don't know what Iron is doing with that one, by the way. I want to just point out
Mm.
it shouldn't have even happened because why is he not even looking where he's kicking the ball? Just once the ball's there, just get it away. Don't smash it into the Liverpool. It was frustrating in itself. The offside one, they were looking at the wrong player. Absolutely. You when they because they did the semi-automated offside, which I've been asking for years. It's what they use in the Champions League. It works a lot better. But Van Dijk was onside, fine. But like you say, FTK wasn't, and I just you can't get those decisions wrong. And it feels like I don't think we did with this, but it feels like when we go to the go back to the VAR. I mean, Howard Webb said it was the incorrect decision. Am I right? He said one of them was the
Mm.
incorrect decision. I can't remember which one it was. And it's like this revision, this whole after the fact matter of oh well, yeah, it was the wrong decision. Sorry about that. It doesn't help you, especially when you're in a relegation battle. That point, if we go down by a point, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if we got relegated by a point, right? You look back on this and you think this just cannot happen. And VAR in itself, they keep trying to improve it, and that's fine. You don't want to intervene on everything. That's fine. There's rumours next season about corners being on VAR.
Hmm.
If the corner's been awarded to the right team, I just think that you're going to keep going down this. It's going to keep snowballing. We're going to keep getting to a point where it's like, okay, well, now VAR controls literally everything. The referee's not even needed on the pitch. How far do we go with it to still get the decisions wrong?
Yeah.
It's almost better off just making the wrong decision, but letting the referee make the wrong decision rather than overanalyzing stuff to get to this point. I know as a Forest
Mm.
fan, if I think the McAllister one's harsh and that gets, that's 1-0, fine. I can accept that. But the offside one, it's just how can we look at the wrong player? I mean, it's bizarre. It's bizarre
Yeah.
that could possibly happen.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that I would say about offside decisions with VAR is that sometimes you get goals that are given and you kind of think, well, you're not even going to show us the lines. Now, the obvious one as a Forest supporter that comes to my mind was in the FA Cup when Diogo Jota, it looked to the naked eye like he was offside. And they said, no, no, we drew the lines, but they never showed us the lines. And
Mm.
it's like if you're gonna do that, you've got to be really transparent with how you do it. Yeah, certainly it seems as though Howard Webb said that the Ekatike should have probably been given offside. But again, in fairness, the Igor Jesus goal at Anfield that was handball was more or less the same as the Ashley Barnes one, with the difference being that Ashley Barnes, they said, yeah, that's definitely a handball. And with Jesus, it said, we definitely can't prove it wasn't a handball. So, yeah, if you're going to revise it, you've got to get it right, haven't you? So, absolutely. All right, let's move on then to a couple of other bits and pieces. And we'll talk about managers again. We alluded to it in part one. It's not about tactics anymore, is it? I mean, we saw on Sunday that Vitor Pereira, he changed the formation and he went to five at the back with a box midfield, and that enabled us to regain a little because we were totally overrun in midfield for until that point. And it enabled us to get a little bit more control back. But ultimately, the tactics now are don't lose rather than anything more nuanced than that. And formations and personnel are merely tools to be able to achieve that tactic. Going back to what Ray said a couple of weeks ago, tactics are one thing, but atmosphere and application is quite another, isn't it? So would you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the atmosphere after the Wolves game was horrific. I think anyone that was at that game, it was incredibly toxic. I don't know. I don't want to say I feel sympathy for Sean Dyche, but I think I do. To be honest, I think
Mm.
I think a lot of fans dismissed him before he was appointed. He
Yeah.
doesn't play football I like. So we talk about managers. The overarching point is that we got rid of a manager in the summer. Which, look, yeah, I've said on the show before, I wasn't always a massive fan of Nuno, right? I didn't love the style of football we played at first, but when the results came, I didn't care because you can't care when the results are coming. That's all that matters. I had some of the most amazing memories of my life as a football fan under Nuno, and I thank him for everything he's done. I love the bloke now. He converted
Yeah.
me completely. But in the summer, you chose Edu over Nuno. That's the
Yeah.
choice that you made, and that's not my opinion. That's the choice that you made. After you made that choice, you've got every other option, every other choice since then wrong. Ange was too. I don't think Ange is a bad manager. Too quick after the Spurs job, like I said. Sean Dyche, firefighting manager too early in the season. It was October, right? Vitor Pereira. I'm not. I actually don't. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh saying it's the wrong appointment because the time that you appointed him in February, what option have you got?
Mm.
You've not got managers queuing up to take a job for 3 months and potentially have a relegation on their CV.
Yeah.
In the summer, maybe. In the summer, Marco Silva's contract's up at Fulham. I don't think Vitor Pereira's here past this season, by the way, even if we stay up.
No, you won't find anyone else in 1865 who thinks so either.
No. So I think that Marco Silva is going to get the big sell by Marinakis if we're still in the Premier League next season to take this
Yeah.
job. And I think he's a fantastic manager, right? But Marinakis, as much as we all love him as an owner, has made a lot of mistakes in the last, 6, 7 months. And unfortunately, those mistakes might cost us Premier League status. And that is incredibly frustrating as a fan.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, it's all the fallout that goes with it, isn't it? So, um, we know that there's going to be players leaving in the summer. We know that the big three are Murillo, Gibbs White, and Anderson. But the Sangares of this world as well. Big chance that whatever division we're in, that some or all of those players won't be at the City Ground next season. I guess. I mean, you've said that Pereira wouldn't be in your choice, but what choice did we have? I'm just thinking back to the first season in the Premier League, whereby having had a really terrible run of form, Stevie Cooper, he did that thing. Again, we're talking about feeling rather than tactics. Yeah, he tweaked the formation, but by Felipe, for example, settling in and being able to allow Brennan Johnson to have just that little bit of freedom again, that kind of thing. And it meant that it was almost sheer force of will that kept Forest up. And let's not forget, we didn't just stay up, we stayed up in 16th. And okay, it wasn't until the last kick of the last match of the season that we knew we were safe. But it really was. And that Arsenal match, which quite a few of us from the podcast we met up for a pint beforehand, didn't we? And there's just that feeling of we can do this, we're gonna do this, and in the atmosphere in the ground is absolutely incredible, and it was sheer force of will. It was almost like fans in the Trenton sucking the ball into the net when it hit Taiwo's knee and bounced away. And that's what we need this time, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think Vitor Pereira, to his credit, has done something that Dyche didn't do in his whole tenure. He's actually changed the way that he wants to do stuff. He's actually made a change in the game, not just like wait. Half time, he's decided, right, I'm going to give it 5 or 10 minutes, then I'm going to change the formation, and he did. And I think we'll have a lot of success with that formation. Your only question is Jai Cunha going to be, is he going to come in and is he going to be capable of being that third centre half in a relegation battle? I think he
Mhm.
can, by the way.
I think he can, yeah.
For what it's worth, I think he can. Like, I think, especially if you play him, out probably what right centre back, you'd imagine. You'd have Milenkovic in the middle, Murillo on the left,
Yeah.
it'd make the most sense. So I think if Jai Cunha can come in and do that job, I think you get more out of the squad in that formation. Luca Netz might be involved a little bit more, and because
Yeah.
I do really like him. Right back, you've got Aina or Williams. You've got a bit more depth if you're playing wing backs, and then I think you just get a bit more control in the midfield. There's this very outdated opinion of a lot of people that having a three at the back or a back five is defensive. It doesn't have to be, certainly in the way that Vitor Pereira implements it as a manager. So look, I'm trying to be really positive. and I'm hoping that at some point down the stretch we'll have one of those results again. You know,
Yeah.
it Bournemouth. I said, you want like the most poetic way of Forest staying in the Premier League is by beating Bournemouth on the last day, beating a team that you can't beat, beating your bogey team on the last day of the season
Yeah.
to stay in the Premier League is probably the most Forest way of staying in the Premier League.
Yeah.
It'd be poetic.
And actually just getting a league win under Pereira, especially if has been something like a change of formation or just something that's kind of quite visible and that leads to a win, would change the entire mood amongst the fan base and possibly even for the players, wouldn't it? And Pereira
Yeah.
knows that he can't do massive tactical shifts because there's no point, there's not enough time, the players are too knackered. The matches are coming thick and fast, although, of course, we have got a blank weekend coming up, so it'll be interesting to see what he does with that. There's a 2 week break coming up at the end of March, beginning of April as well. The players need a rest, don't they? They really do. They look absolutely physically and mentally shattered.
I think the idea was Fenerbahce was going to be a rest, and then the players on the
Well,
pitch were struggling to see that one out, so he had to introduce, some of the starters. The squad, the depth itself is a massive problem. We don't have depth really. I
mm,
mean, I think that your players that are coming, and look, I'm not going to sit here and give Dylan backward pelters, right? He's in his early 20s. He's come from France. He hasn't had a run of games whatsoever. How on earth are you expecting he's going to come in and just hit the ground running and be, this play? Amari Hutchinson, young lad. James McAtee, young lad. You brought in all these young players. I don't disagree with any of the players you brought in on a purely what you're looking to do sort of way. You want to make the squad younger. You want to bring in players that have got a high ceiling, the Brighton model, as it were. The difference is with Brighton is that they bring in players from South America for 5 or 10 million quid and sell them for 100 million quid. They don't spend the best part of over £100 million on McAtee, Amari Hutchinson, and Dylan Bakwa, and expect that they're going to come in and give you this massive squad depth and like, oh, we can lean on these young players to come in at the drop of a hat and just keep a similar level to the starting 11. It hasn't worked, and it's it's meant that in Europe, games that could have been a rest for your starters, they've had to play. Igor Jesus having to start every single game and stuff is it's a little bit circumstantial, but Taiwo has been fit for his times this season. You've got strikers in the under 21s that you could have chucked in if the players around them, if the supporting cast have got the results over the line, and that's your larger issue. That's why the rest is needed so much now. You're looking at players like Elliot Anderson on against Brighton. He's absolutely knackered. You could
yeah.
see it on him, struggling to get through the games. I'm not going to sit here and say that all these footballers that are on awful lots of money, we should all sit there and feel sorry for them because they've got to play more football. But no one else in this relegation battle. Obviously, Tottenham have got Champions League football. I do understand that, right? Tottenham aren't going to win the Champions League. I don't think we're going to win the Europa League. But if you're worried about West Ham don't play a game in midweek, right? They don't
Mm,
have to worry about that going into a weekend. I am concerned about relegation because I'm concerned about West Ham more than anything.
yeah.
They get that break and we don't, and that makes a massive difference.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And again, thinking back to when Nuno saved us from relegation, that was by the skin of the teeth, lowest points total ever to escape relegation. We'd had the points deduction and everything. And in that instance, we were helped by the fact that the teams below us were that much further back, although I say it was skin of the teeth last day of the season once again. So yeah, yeah, we can't rely on that this time around. Just to finish off, then, Adam, just it's Man City tomorrow. We couldn't have really wished for a worse match to do when we've had a run of games without any rest, without any time to kind of regroup and so on. Do you see us having even the slightest hope of getting anything out of that one?
No, no, not even remotely. I think that Man City are in that time of year where they just win every game sort of thing,
Yeah.
and I do stuff that they're going to win the Premier League.
So I'm just thinking then, is that an opportunity to maybe experiment with Jair as a right-sided centre back in a balanced back three? Maybe give Williams a rest and play Nets. Maybe play Taiwo instead of Igor. That kind of thing.
I think potentially, yeah. You've got to look at this from the outside perspective here. You've got West Ham and Forest have got the same fixtures in the next 2 games, and
Mm.
which is obviously quite unique in itself, isn't it? But if West Ham get nothing at Fulham, which if you look at Fulham's record against teams in the bottom half of the Premier League, it's impeccable, especially at
Mm.
home. So if West Ham get nothing at Fulham, it really doesn't matter if we get anything at City, I would say. We
Mm.
then go into Fulham at home where we've got an opportunity. They then play City. So it it's hard to say before you pick a team. It all depends on what West Ham do, but it does a little bit. But look, we're not going to get anything at City away. Not many teams get anything there. We're not playing well enough at the minute. I would 100% go in with the three at the back and just try your best to kind of get that new formation in a game situation. The only thing that you've got to bear in mind is obviously with Jaya Cunha. I think it might be Morato. I don't like saying that out loud because I don't want it to be. Jaya Cunha's a young lad. What you don't want to do is you don't want to send him out against Man City and tank his confidence. So
Yeah.
that is probably all I'll be mindful of. But formation wise, yeah, I would go with the three at the back.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Adam. So for regular listeners, you may remember that Adam isn't just a football fan. So tell us where else we can find you.
Yeah, so I've got a wrestling podcast, THP Wrestling. If you want to go, if you're interested in wrestling stuff, I've got a few projects coming up that I can't talk about yet with other sports, which I'm excited about. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's go and follow me over there. It's England on fifth, so that'd be
Okay.
cool.
All right. Thanks a lot, Adam, and great to talk to you again. And thank you very much for listening and or watching, depending upon whether you're on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And we will be back with a report after the Man City match. Come on, you Reds.